Okay, we'll get started. Just can you just read the message at the top of the chat, people, where Tamara asks you to, if you've got a question, to put it into the Q&A. I'm going to open the Q&A tab now, so that any questions, that's where I'll see them. So I won't see questions in the chat. Just to the right of the little chat heading, you've got chat, people, Q&A. If you've got a specific question, send it through the Q&A. And there's a chance that I'll see it even while I'm talking. So I'm going to talk for the next 25 minutes or so about the smart coding and the creative coding tools in MAXQDA. These were not significantly altered by the version 2022, but other than the general thematic things. And let's just start by thinking about smart coding. I want to draw out contrasts between the two of these. Smart coding is something you do during the main coding phase of your project. It could be part of the coding process. And I suggest 4 possible uses of smart coding here in this screenshot. Refining detailed codings, confirming the consistency within a code, checking that a code you have already applied to a whole lot of segments, that they are all consistent. Possibly you might use it to split a code into several more detailed codes, and that's something will use as my demonstration in just a few moments' time. Or you might use it to reassign coded segments from a code that you no longer want, reassign them into several other codes, and then delete the now empty code. But I want to emphasize, smart coding works at the level of individual coded segments. I'll briefly contrast that with creative coding, which is done after you've done your main coding work. It works with whole codes together with all of their data segments, and you move whole code groups around to create new groupings and possibly develop higher level concepts. But let's just go back and go into smart coding. And now I'm going to switch into a live MAXQDA, and I'm using the work-life balance example. Here is the actual work-life balance English language example project. I haven't made any significant changes to it in this version, but other than to activate all of the interview group of documents, that's the 10 documents interviewing specific people with classic kind of interview style data. And from the code system, I'm going to pick up the code called typical workday, and I'm going to refine this by dividing it up between a whole bunch of codes. I'm going to split it into several more detailed codes. So by activating my typical workday, I pull its 16 coded segments into my retrieve segments panel. Now, the smart coding tool can be started either from the codes menu, it's up there, but note its icon. A better place to start it is down here in the retrieve segments panel. If I start it up here, it will load all of coded segments of the project into its current memory, and that may take quite a little while if you've got a big project. Down here, if you start it from the retrieve segments, you'll get a quicker load because it only loads the segments which are in the retrieve segments panel, and those are the ones I want to work with, so just 16 coded segments. So I'm going to start it from there, and that will open up. Here it comes. So that was a little loading moment, but it has loaded those segments in. And I now have a new working screen on top of the rest of my screen. And while I'm in this screen, the rest of the project is frozen. I can't access it until I quit the smart coding tool with its X button on the top bar. So let's have a look at this what we've got in this window. We've got a little bit of the code system, just the relevant bits of the code system to get to the activated code, which I started from by starting it in the retrieve segments panel. If I unclick this only activated codes, I get the whole of the code system available to me. but I don't want those at the moment, so I'm going to stick with just the activated code. In the middle part, I have the 16 coded segments of that were active. There's a little problem. It's not from 2 documents. It's from 8 or 10 documents, I think. But I've got the 16 coded segments that are currently coded to typical Workday with their document IDs, Riley, Selim, Chris, and so on. And over here, I've got 2 columns for codes and comments, which are currently empty. But in this codes column, MAXQDA will display any other codes currently visible in the code system window to the left, which are attached to all or part of the segments displayed here. So if I, again, unclick the only activated codes to show the whole code system, now it is showing me other codes attached to this segment: flexible hours, amount of hours, free time, self-care, and so on. And I can scroll up and down and see them. But I'm going to hide those at the, oh, sorry. And also, if I click on a code such as amount of hours, it now jumps into displaying the 14 coded segments that match that. So that will come useful in a little while, but I'm going to go back to my typical Workday and hide the unactivated codes. So in this panel, I've now got the possibility of applying more codes, moving things around, and doing further coding work. This is the refining part of the tool. I can assign new codes, create new codes, and assign them to data, and I can move things around. If you get hold of the handout that I prepared for this session, you'll see a long list of activities that I suggest you try. Many of them are pretty intuitive, but I will now try and briefly demonstrate them. The first panel segment here from Matteo, he talks about his working hours through the day and so on. So I could create a new code for that. If I hover over my typical Workday, I get the little new code button coming up here. So I can create a code from there for working hours. I can choose colors in a typical way and so on. Okay. And that goes in as a subcode of typical Workday. And if I want, I can attach all or part of this segment to it by just clicking and dragging that across. I can code it with working hours, and the new code is shown up there. I've attached the whole segment to that. Let's come down to someone down here. And just show if I'm just going to, if I double click, I can turn it white, and then I can paint within here and say I wanted to code that little bit of segment to working hours. I can do that. Having highlighted it, I can drag that over, and just that part has been coded to working hours. If I click here, it highlights in orange the segment that has been attached to working hours, whereas up there the whole segment. So you can attach whole segments or partial segments to new codes. And I'm just having a little trouble with my scrolling. Here we are, Tatiana. I have a quick cup of coffee. So let me just highlight that. Say I wanted to create a new code for that. If I highlight it and right click, I can create and assign a new code, which I'm going to call food and drink. Give that a color, attach it, and there's my food and drink. And if I click on that, it has just attached food and drink just to that part. So there's another way in which I can create new codes. Come back to there. It takes a little bit of work to get used to this. This one is talking about children, so let's just attach a whole code to that. Right click, create and assign a new code, and we'll call this children. Then color and OK, and that's attached to that. And then did anybody else mention children? Yes, this one mentioned children, so I can add that one to the children code quite easily. So now children's got 2 segments, and now if I click on the children one over here, I can check those 2 segments. Both are covering mentioning children and so on. So in those ways, I can create and attach more codes. As I attach new codes, they appear over on the right. One little thing that experienced users of MAXQDA might find, some people might find slightly difficult, is you cannot attach a code by dragging from the left to the right. Say this one, I'm in Arna here, and I want to attach children to this. I think he's talking about children. If I click on children to drag it over, as soon as I've clicked on children, it's switched to the 2 children codes. So you can't attach a code by dragging from left to right. You can only attach a code by dragging from right to left to add that one to the children code. So those are the ways in which you can attach codes: by dragging from right to left if the code already exists, or by selecting all or part of a segment and right-clicking in it to pick up a new code. I was going to mention something about travel. I think this person talks about traveling. So let's create a new code for travel. And again, give that a different code, color, and OK. And so you can have as many codes as you like listed over here. And now a couple of other things. If I change my mind, I can remove a coded segment. I can remove, say, the travel code from this segment by a click on this X here. One click and it's gone. Travel no longer has any code, any segments attached to it. There is an undo, so if I didn't mean that to happen, I can restore it. That's one way in which I can remove a code. Let's just take this one in children. Again, another thing to get used to in this display is that it doesn't show the code that you're in the margin here, because that's displayed up here. So all the segments on this screen at the moment share the code children. So in the codes column to the right, it only displays any other codes attached to them. I'm not quite sure why typical workday doesn't appear there at the moment, but we are subcodes of typical workday, so perhaps that is assumed. But it shows me, so in the children, if I want to move a code from one segment to another, say I want to take this one and take it out of children and put it into food and drink. If I hold the shift key pressed while I drag it onto food and drink, it has done it, but I wasn't expecting the whole code segment to come. Look at food and drink, and I'm not sure if I did get it or not. That was interesting. That's more like it. That's moved that one back to children. So something slightly strange happened there the first time, but the second time it did work. Hold the shift key pressed on a Windows computer as you drag a segment onto another code. It will uncode from the code you're currently in and apply the other code to it afterwards. I'm going to close that session now, and I'm going to switch into another another version of the same project. Now I've moved forward a few hours in time. I'm in the same project with the same documents, but now my typical workday has got a whole lot more coded segments. If I now, once again, if I activate all of this group and my interviews, so I get 114 coded segments down here and go back into my smart coding. Takes a little bit longer. Now you can see rather more convincing how it looks when you've done quite a considerable amount of refinement of your codes over here. So we've got lots of extra codes being displayed. We've still got the 16 coded segments of typical workday, but they've been attached to lots more. And if I say click on the children one, I can scroll up and down within the full 16 coded segments and check that all the bits highlighted in the bright yellow-orange color, they're all coded to children, and so on. That's one way of checking that I haven't missed anything that should be coded to children. And if I want to check for consistency, if I just click on the children over here, I get the 12 segments coded to children across, now showed without any highlights in their own right. Oh God, now let's just have a quick look, see if we've got any questions. Andres is making a technical point there. Oh, I can see they've been answered by people. Okay, well, thank you. Lots of people have been answering for me, so that's great. So now I'm gonna quit that smart coding session. The last one is just highlighted there. Let's just get rid of those highlighting that are shouting at me. Right, I go back to my PowerPoint. Now I'm going to switch into creative coding. But just before we leave smart coding, you might refine detailed codings, moving things around, confirm consistency, look at one code, say children, and check that they're all there. Very easy to move between codes, much easier than in the retrieve segments window for that kind of task. I was doing it splitting a code into several or more detailed codes, and reassigning a code is when you would want to remove the current coding as you recode it to a different code. Reassigning, so that's when you hold the shift key pressed as you drag to something else until there are no coded segments left. So smart coding working at the level of individual coded segments. Now we'll switch into creative coding. We've done our initial inductive coding work, and we're now ready to reorganize our codes and possibly develop some higher level concepts. So let's go back into the project that I was just working on. I don't need these activations now. I don't need any activations, and come to my codes, and I've got the creative coding, and this is the only place to start creative coding. So I'm going to work with the same data that I was just working on, the typical workday, with all of these different codes that I've now identified by refinement of that. So I'll go into creative coding. Again, up will come a new window, the creative coding window, and this works on the Max Maps interface. Hopefully most of you are familiar with Max Maps in part. If you're not, this might convince you that it's worth getting to know Max Maps. It's giving me an instruction here to drag all the codes I want to organize into this area and to click the Start Organizing Codes button up there when I'm ready to start organizing. Now, you can just drag codes in individually if you want to work with individual codes and so on. If you make mistakes, select a code and you've got to remove from map, you can send it back. And I don't want them that way, but you can bring codes in that way if they're all over the place. But if I drag in a header code which has subcodes like this, the typical workday code, I get the whole tree. I get the typical workday and all of its subcodes. And this is in fact the data that I now want to work on. I want to identify some different concepts with this typical workday. And so that's the data I'm going to work with now. So I'm now going to click on Start Organizing Codes. And now it's fixed. I can't bring any more codes in. On the left, instead of seeing my code system, I just get the code colors currently in use in the project, and the possibility of adding new colors later on when I want. So now I'm in a map and I can move things around in this map. If I take the header code, I can move it up. And if I take these more detailed codes, I can move them around and group them. And it occurs to me looking at them, some of these codes discuss things about work times, meetings. Some of them talk about the home, things like housework and shopping. Those look like things together. And some are very personal. Meditation, showering, those are obviously things that are quite personal. Friends, I'm going to move off to the side here. Travel and commuting, that sounds more like a work related thing. Computer, oh, that's probably work, isn't it? Drag that over to here. Work at home, that's very specifically referencing work. Children, we'll put children into the domestic one. Relax, that sounds like me time. And exercise, sometimes it's difficult to get these things. You've got to be a little bit. Studying, that sounds like quite a personal thing. Oh, description of work goes over here. Free time. Who gets free time? My goodness. Click until we can pick it up. There we are. Now I can drag that over to here. Food and drink. Just picking up other arrows. Got it. I can drag it over there. A few clicks. So I think yes. So these little groups. I'm getting a concept of work. Typical work day. Typical day includes a whole lot of things to do with work. It includes some things that are very personal and some things that are quite domestic. So now I'm going to create some new codes for this. So I create a new code for work. Click OK. It appears in the top left. I can drag it down and put it roughly above the work group. I'll have another new code for personal. OK, and drag that and put that sort of in the middle. And one more new code for domestic. These are the higher level concepts that have come to me as I'm thinking about them. If I'm not sure about any of the codes, does that really fit within this? So say these meetings, if I right click on a code, I can look at the overview of the coded segments. So I can get up the overview coded segments and I can quickly check through and read all the data segments that are attached to that and decide, yes, that is to do with work. So that's fine. So on any one, right click on a segment, overview of coded segments, and you can read the data associated with that code or attached to that code via its coded segments. So I've got my intermediate level or higher level concepts, work, personal, and domestic, but I now want to attach the individual codes to these instead of to the typical workday. For that, I need the link function. I turn on link mode. When that is showing as a gray, now I'll find I can't move things around, but I can draw arrows. So if I click on work and then drag down to computer, a new arrow appears. And when I release the mouse, the old arrow linking typical workday to computer disappears. Fundamental rule of MAXQDA, no man can serve two masters, no code can have two parents. So a code can only be a subcode of one other. I'm still in link mode, so now I can drag down to work at home. When I get the highlight, release it, and work at home has been attached to work. So I work away, dragging these ones down, and each time I create a new link, the old link back to typical workday disappears until all of those have been created as a little group. I do the same with personal, drag down. You've got to wait till you get the highlight. Okay, I've got that one done. Can I get that exercise? Yes, got it. Sometimes this can be a little bit fiddly because of just where the codes are, but it's quite fun. And now the domestic, to children, to housework, and to shopping. And I've created 3 little subgroups. And the last step now is to make these subcodes of typical workday, which I can do by dragging from there, there, and there. And I've now created a new coding structure which incorporates these higher level concepts of work, personal, and domestic. Now, let's think about color, because they're all the same blue color at the moment, and we've got this big color box over here. If I just select my work code, oh, I've got to come out of linking mode, sorry, leave linking mode. Now I can move things around a bit more to tidy up the shapes, maybe, make it look a little bit neater. Now that I've got these in this kind of way. So so I can make it look as smart as I like. Now, if I select the work one, so that's highlighted, I can choose a new color for work. Let's give work a bright purple. And as I select it, rather neatly, it comes up, do I want to change color for the subcodes? And I'm going to say yes, because I think that could be rather good, that all the work subcodes get the same color as work. Come to personal, and let's select a green for that and change the color of the subcodes. So hopefully you can see that those are going green. And domestic, let's give that a blue color, change a light blue, and we'll leave the friends with a fairly dark blue. So that essentially has done it. Whenever I select any of these in the format menu, I've got the possibility of doing all sorts of other things to the format, but there is very little function in terms of analysis associated with that. Those formats are just for prettying the map. The only functional thing that I can identify that goes across when we close this is the colors that I've just changed with the purple, green, and light blue. I'm now going to quit my creative coding session, having done my reorganization, and I get a rather scary dialogue comes up with 3 buttons. You can read this dialogue a little bit later. The cancel button, let's deal with that first. Cancel means, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the quit. I haven't finished doing my creative coding. I want to cancel the quitting. So if I click on cancel now, we just stay within the map and nothing has changed. So if I actually wanted to create a new code and I just slip with my mouse and hit the quit, it's not a disaster. But if I do want to quit, then I've got to consider the yes and no. Yes applies the new code structure to the code system, and it warns us this process is non-reversible. And the no, it will forget the changes that I made. Well, it won't completely forget them, because in either case, it creates a map in Max Maps showing the layout behind here. So if I click no, nothing will change in my code system, but there will be a map showing what I was thinking at this point. But if I want to make those changes, I'll need to come into another creative coding session and do the work again. I'm going to say yes. Let it think a moment, and it's done it. So now my code system has altered. All the codes I've been working with have been moved to the top of the code system. So typical workday, which was the group header, is at the top. The higher level codes have been put in alphabetical order. So we get domestic, then friends, then work. Actually, I'm not quite sure where work has come before personal. I thought it was alphabetical order, but it isn't. And the remaining interview codes are still there down below. So if I want to put this back into its place, the typical workday, I'm just going to minimize those groups, and then I can drag the typical workday and put it down under interview codes and expand them again, and I've got them back in place in the code system. They're there with their coded segments and their colors, and I've reorganized my code system through the creative coding session. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So creative coding, after you've done your initial inductive coding, when you're ready to reorganize, create new groupings, and I suggest those groupings could involve higher level concepts. But the key thing is that the creative coding works with whole codes together with all of their data segments, whereas the smart coding, which I demonstrated earlier, was concerned with detailed coded segments and recoding and changing codes, splitting codes, and that sort of thing, working at the level of the coded segments. Smart coding and creative coding, 2 quite similar names, and side by side on the coding toolbar. So make sure you can get clear in your minds what those differences are. And now I'm going to turn my attention to the questions again and see Uti asked a question about, is there a feature to rearrange the codes in the maps? Well, yes. If I go into my visual tools and open Max Maps, I'll find here in Max Maps is my creative coding session. If I click on it, there is the map I have just been working on. So if you want to use this map as an image in an appendix to your thesis or whatever, you could copy it like this, but you could go on inside Max Maps now and smarten it up even further. It's straight away I can move things around, and I've got all of the format options to change fonts and colors and all sorts of things like that. I can shrink it down a bit so that it fits the window slightly better. And so on. And also within the start menu in Max Maps, I've got the possibility of sending this map to a QTT worksheet, which is a good place to store images of things ready to go into your thesis, or I could just copy it as an image or export it in a variety of formats if you want. But you can smarten it up, but it's important that if you've used it from creative coding, that you don't change any of the links in your Max Map, which you could do in Max Maps, because that would be deceiving. This is showing how you rearranged the things during the course of your work. And as a further supplementary to that, if I come back to my codes and I reopen the creative coding, and I bring in my typical Workday group again with its subcodes, it looks a little bit different. And I'll start organizing codes again. So I'm going to get another map, but we've got the same data largely here. Move typical Workday up a bit higher. I could do further work on this, but while you're working, you've also got the possibility to save intermediate versions of your map. Save a map partway through. So if you want to show several steps of your thinking as you go through the creative working process, you can save several versions of your creative coding by directly saving as a map. When you quit, it will save the last map automatically, but you can do some intermediate steps if you want. So Jamel, to smart coding a particular code, does the code need to be activated first? Not absolutely necessarily, Jamel, no. It's just more efficient if you activate the data you want to work with and then start it from the Retrieve Segments panel. You'll find things happen quicker. You can start smart coding from the main menu. Let me just quit this creative coding session and I won't save any changes. So if you start smart coding from here, it will take quite a lot longer to load because it's loading all of the coded segments. While I'm talking, it's doing it and thinking about it, but it's got quite a lot of coded segments to load. So you'll find it quite a bit slower. That's why I recommend activating the data you want to work with and loading it from, but I've got the data there from that initial loading. So that was Jamel's question. Ashwak. Okay, well, I've tried to make that clear, Ashwak. In which stage of the analysis you use smart and creative coding? I would definitely think that smart coding would come earlier in your analysis than creative coding. Smart coding is when you're really thinking detailed work, analyzing and thinking in great detail about smaller bits of data. The creative coding is when you can lump together a whole load of segments under the umbrella of their code title and think of them as all sharing this theme in common, and then think about how those themes fit together with other themes, as I was identifying with the personal, the things that were about personal care, showering, relaxing, meditating, and so on. Uti, if I've already coded a doc, I want to copy and paste the coded segment into a new doc. That's nothing to do with smart coding, really. Copying and pasting into other documents. Do that from your Retrieve Segments window or from your document browser if that's really what you're after. I don't think that really fits with smart coding. That would be not a good place to do it. The handouts for the session will be made available somewhere from the conference. I'm quite sure. I'm not quite sure what Andreas is here. When you use smart coding by default, MAXQDA copies to the subcodes. Often we want to empty top codes as results. Ah, okay. I think. Okay, let's come back to my typical workday. What Andreas is saying is, when I was coding these, actually, I think that's not going to be the best place to demonstrate that. I'm going to go back to home and go back into my earlier project. My typical workday and its subcodes, and start smart coding. Oh, and those interviews, and start the smart coding. So I'm just going back to where I was much earlier in the spotlight session. If I want to, at the end of this session, to have nothing attached to typical workday, I want to recode everything from typical workday into other places. That is where I would hold the shift key as I attach the codes to other segments. I don't think I can do the I can't delete it over here in the right margin, because it doesn't show me the typical workday code as it's the holding code. This one in Riley is talking about travel. So if I hold shift as I drag that over to travel, I'm getting that strange effect. Oh no, it's doing all sorts of things. Now it's working, I think. No. That's how I want to do it, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Oh, that's got two together because I held shift at the wrong moment. Oh, I should be doing the control key. Let's undo that. Perhaps it's not shift. It's the control key, not the shift key. That's what I'm doing wrong. And then it's removed it. I've now gone from 16 down to 15. So sorry, it's the control key, not the shift key. So Andreas was just making the point that if you just drag plain, it will add a new coding and leave the existing coding in place. If I hold the control key pressed, this Riley 7, hold control key pressed and put that to children, and it's removed it. It's gone from here. That's the essential difference between those two. Claire asked, how to highlight an individual segment. I think this must be in the smart code. It highlighted all in green the entire. Oh, sorry. If you just want to do a little bit of a segment, Claire, highlight the segment all in green and then double click and it goes white. And then when you've got it double clicked in white, it's possible to highlight an individual segment. Now I'm getting the blue highlighting, and if I drag that, I can code that to food and drink. The food and drink appears here. When I click on that, only the orange bit is what's coded to food and drink. First of all, most importantly, I get a coffee. Let's look at food and drink. First of all, and most importantly, I get a coffee. There's confirmation that only that part of the segment got coded with that food and drink. Hopefully that answers Claire's question. Oh, I should be going to the top. Gisela is saying about dragging in the maps, looking at the creative coding seems cumbersome. Why not simply do it in the code system, which you still can do? Other advantages of using maps. It's simply, Gisela, that it's more visual, moving things around in the maps. I've had to do it fairly quickly because I've only got a limited 30 minutes for this demonstration. It's much more possible to have second thoughts, to change your mind about things. The fact that in the maps, inside the maps, you can still open up the overview of coded segments to read the coded segments behind something. You're thinking of putting two things together with a higher level concept. You can check the coded segments attached to both of them before you do that. I also failed to mention you can actually merge two codes within a creative coded session by dragging one code onto another in the map, and the two codes will become one with the name of the one that was left in place, not the one that was moved. But it's a matter of taste. Some people find that visual way of thinking very handy and useful and creative. It is a more creative way of thinking possibly than dragging codes around the code system. But if you're very happy with the way you've been working, that's fine. Carry on doing that. Uti is asking about the direction arrows in the maps. In the creative coding, there is meaning associated with the arrows in creative coding because it is defining segments as subcodes. So the arrow coming down the map is showing that that is a subcode. I'm just going to quit that smart coding. I need to go back into my Creative 2, where I've got the maps, and open my Max Maps and my creative coding. So here, this arrow, as with a direction arrow in the creative coding map, is saying work is a subcode of typical workday. This arrow is saying work described is a subcode of work. There is very big meaning attached to that. Now, the fact that in an ordinary map, you can have double-headed arrows and all sorts of things. That is a different matter. So that's where you've got to be careful to distinguish when you're in a creative coding map from when you're in an ordinary Max Maps, where you may want to associate all sorts of other meanings. So hopefully that's answered Uti's question. Lydia is looking at new types of code models. That's back into Max Maps. That's outside the syllabus for this smart coding and creative coding. So I'm going to leave that. Joko, I guess the smart code to simplify the working code and hidden other code. Is that it? The smart code window is working with these coded segments, allowing you very quickly to jump between all the segments attached to one code and all the segments attached with it to another code, and to reassign codes within that window. It's like a whole series of retrieve segments panels, but linked in a handy way so that you can jump between them in effect. But it's trying to simplify, but what you're doing is actually quite sophisticated, I think. Now, we have got to the end of the 45 minutes, and you probably need to be moving off to other sessions. So I need Tamara to come in here. Should we be moving on? And I'm going to look at some of the comments, but I think we probably... But I think it's time to move on. The time for the session, I think, is complete. You're very welcome. All those kind people thanking me. The best thanks you can give me is to go away and use the tools and do better research as a result. But it's great, fantastic to see so many of you. Wonderful. If there are any questions that weren't answered, you'll get an email later on, because the MAXQDA team will look through and look for questions that haven't got the answered stamp on them, and they'll probably send you an email. So sorry if I missed one of your questions and didn't get to it. But for your benefit, if you're in other sessions, look for the Q&A to ask questions, rather than they get a bit buried in the chat. But if you put them into Q&A, the presenters have got more chance of spotting them as questions. And obviously, please don't put general chat into the Q&A, because that would stop other people's questions getting found. But you're all very welcome. Hopefully that's clarified those two tools for a number of people.